All right, guys, as part of WTKA's Fantastic Friday before the Michigan State game, I got to spend some time with my buddy, Steve Clarke, co host of the Countdown to Kickoff. And we got to talk about, naturally, the Minnesota game, the Little Brown Jug, a little bit of Paul Bunyan Trophy history, and a lot more. So here's the segment. I hope you enjoy it. And again, if you like these videos, like, share them, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and there'll be more to come. Go Blue.
Sports Talk 1050 WTKA. But right now I want to talk to Greg Dooley, Michigan historian, creators of mvictors.com. He creates, he writes, he voices This Week in Michigan Football History for the Countdown to Kickoff's prestigious third and final hour, and a future co-host with me in a podcast tentatively called Sports, Stocks, Suds, Spirits, and Cigars. We may have to work on shortening that title. First episode.
S's, line them all up. Just
yeah.
S.
First episode will be sometime this decade, Greg, or maybe the next.
I think this is the pilot, and so far it's not going so well, Steve. So.
Right, the microphone issues. Greg, today it's a great opportunity to talk about Michigan keeping the Little Brown Jug and to discuss the Paul Bunyan Trophy. Greg, first of all, I mean, the Little Brown Jug stays here in Ann Arbor at least until 2023 when they head back to Minneapolis, though there is the possibility of a rematch in a yet-to-be-determined 9th game in December. Kind of disappointed, though, that ABC shut the game off as soon as it was over. I didn't get to see much of the Jug fanfare or the drug fanfare from Minnesota fans that were in attendance, the very few of them that were hanging outside the gate. But yeah, you know, I like the pageantry of presenting the jug to the players. It's like the Stanley Cup. You know, you lift it over your head and you pass it to the next worthy person, and that person passes it to the next worthy person. It's like ABC was in and out because the game was, you know, such a blowout, 49-24. They just want to get back to local programming as much as possible. But, I mean, did you get to see any of it? And was jug integrity held?
I did not. In fact, I half wondered if they even brought it out. I saw pictures of it outside the locker room in Minneapolis and at TCF, and then pictures later of the players. But I'm hoping that jug security was at a premium with two hands, unlike my friend Winovich a few years ago. But yeah, I miss seeing it. But you know what? It's like it's COVID. There's no fans there, and John Falk, Big John Falk, of course, famed equipment manager, you know, he used to always say, you know, that Bo always wanted him to wait until the very end because everyone wants to see it. Everybody on TV, sure, but also everybody in the crowd. And there really wasn't a big crowd there. And, you know, it's just another, I think, casualty really for me because obviously I love it and I wanted to see it. But, hey, we got it. It's safe, and that's the most important thing.
And at least it's safe in Michigan hands until, you know, 2023, provided, you know, they somehow play again, which I don't want to see happen again. I'd rather see Michigan, you know, of course, play in the Big Ten title game.
Well, that's interesting. People ask me that, like, do they play for the Jug if they play for it again, like in the Big Ten title game? And we did. Minnesota, Michigan played twice, actually, in one season in 1926. And Michigan won both games, but the Jug was on the line both times. So when people ask me that, I say, yeah, the jug is in play if we play twice.
And the scores are written on both the same year, right?
Yes. So it's the one spot in the Jug where it's 1 year, but two sets of scores in 1926. In fact, the last game was Yost's final game as head coach.
So how does that look? Is it two separate equal entries, or did they take an entry and cut it into half and, you know, sort of like did smaller print?
It's about the same font. It's a great question. It's a little more space. The column is a little, or the row is a little wider, relatively speaking.
So cool. You know, I heard a fascinating story on the alumni podcast that you were talking about. You were doing a class about jug security, and Chase Winovich held the jug in the inappropriate way. And apparently he was there at that class that you were trying to tell him about jug security.
Yeah. So I listeners of this show, you know, of course, are familiar with John U. Bacon, and John U. Bacon created this class, The History of Intercollegiate Athletics, that is still an ongoing class. Michael Spath is teaching it this semester, also of WTKA. And anyway, I've done a guest lecture. Well, I talked about it, and I don't know if it was believe me, I can do a full hour on the jug easy. I don't know if the topic was the jug, but the topic of the jug came up because it was Jug Week. And there were several athletes in the lecture, including Winovich. And I made a special point to talk about the frailty of this over 100-year-old stoneware jug, and to, you know, hold it with two hands. If you hold the handle, at least brace it, right? So all your weight is in that. And I wish we could cut to the video here, Steve, but those might remember he went pretty wild with it. He ran with it, and then he actually threw it up in the air with one hand in the student section. And he tweeted at me that I said, "Hey man, didn't you listen to my lecture? Haha, you know, making a joke, everything was safe." And he said basically the effect of, "Yeah, that's why I did it." And then he sent me a picture of one of the pictures of him holding it. So he was trolling me. And I'm still mad at him a little bit for that.
You know, Winovich marches to the beat of his own drummer, though, doesn't he?
He sure does. But I always I do remember that. But does seem to be an all-around great guy. Big supporter of Chad Tufts, Steve, which you're familiar with here, of course, local in the Saline area, which is such a big, important organization, you know, for the legacy of Chad Carr and childhood brain cancer. So he's just all in all seems to be a good guy. He just got my goat that time.
Just that time. Before we talk about the Paul Bunyan Trophy, and it's a different type of story in terms of its reverence, I did get to you've seen the trophy, you've touched the trophy, you've watched the ink put on. The best thing I can do is say that I one time touched it back in an era where things were very, very different in Michigan football, especially in jug security. There was a time, believe it or not, in the 80s and before that, where people from the stands could actually walk on the field before and after a game. I mean, you could see old video clips of just people roaming around like they own the place. And so I figured if a few hundred people are going to do that, why can't I? And I would do that. And then eventually you just sort of do it often enough that people know who you are. And a certain player, maybe I should protect his identity at this point because it just seems so far-fetched, allowed me to momentarily touch the jug after a win. I think it was like in 1988 or something like that. Maybe I'm off by a year or two. But that was a very, very cool moment for me. And of course, do you think I didn't even want to grab the jug because I knew how important it was. I just wanted to be able to put the fingertips on, and that's all I did, and got out of the way. And then I was tackled by security.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I'm glad they've changed that. And for obvious reasons. I mean, first of all, fans are out of control, but then we have security reasons. We can get into all that stuff. I actually think they have a very, very good replica in Schembeckler Hall. They have a replica, and I think Minnesota has one. In fact, it might have been flashed on the pregame show before last week's game. But I think they should just put the replica on the field. Only dorks like me know the difference, really. Okay, like who would know? And just in case something happens, why not? I mean, really, it's a very old replica. In fact, there's, I've kind of tried to figure out where it's from, but it probably dates to the 1930s. It's a very good replica. Just put that one on and keep the real one tucked away.
Well, Greg, if something does happen to the jug, I can tell you what, the most famous person in Ann Arbor would be the glue expert. Yeah. Would come on for years and talk about a half hour of how he, carefully put the jug handle back together or other pieces, because I guess it's not just the handle that could be fragile. But Greg, let's shift a little bit and talk about the Paul Bunyan Trophy, the origin of it. And it's kind of a trophy that's in the past really more important to one team until the other team, Michigan State, kept taking it home for a number of years, where you got to see a number of Michigan players from the most recent era actually seem to care about it.
And I think, and that's also part of the jug tradition, is that it certainly became more important and more visible when Minnesota had it and we wanted it back, right? But yeah, when you talk about the Paul Bunyan Trophy, it literally started 50 years, almost to the day, after the jug. And of course, the jug is the tradition that started the whole concept of college football rivalry trophies. So just right there, it's no wonder that Michigan fans, don't really care for it. But that goes all the way back to so Michigan State started in the Big Ten in 1953, playing football, that is. And we weren't crazy about it. Fritz Chrysler, AD at the time, didn't really want Michigan State. And you get that, right? You think Ohio State would want, say, Cincinnati or another. No, of course not. And by the way, Michigan State was really good. Hat tip to Michigan State. We're in one of their golden eras of football, and they won the league the first year. So why would we want them in there, right? But then you introduce this trophy, which I think Michigan people think was kind of forced down our throat by the governor at the time, a guy named G. Menon Williams. He went by Soapy. And Steve, do you know why he went by Soapy? There's a clue in his name.
Because Soupy was taken?
Soupy was indeed taken. But he actually is called Soapy because his grandfather, you notice his name is Menon. His grandfather is the founder of Menon. Now, when we grew up, Speed Stick by Menon was burned in our brains. But the Speed Stick, but they made soap products and other cleansing products. He's actually the founder of the company, immigrated from Germany. And, he took part of his name there, but they called him Soapy, due to his ties to Menon. But he introduced the trophy. They had a vote. And I mean, there's just a lot of things about it, right? It's 9 feet tall if you include the base. Most of us know the picture of the players holding around just the top, which comes off, but the whole thing's 9 feet. And then let's talk about just Paul Bunyan, okay? Absolutely an important piece of folklore, but not necessarily Michigan, right?
Right. I thought he was a Michigan man growing up until I saw him in every other state across the north.
Exactly. And Canada. Okay. So, and then here's the killer, right? So you got the weird trophy, you got the weird name. Here's the killer. Wisconsin and Minnesota, what do they play for?
Paul Bunyan's axe.
Paul Bunyan's axe started 5 years before Paul Bunyan. So what are we going to call this thing? Let's think. And you settle on something that's already a rivalry trophy in your conference? Okay, it's just odd. And plus, by the way, there's an axe on the Paul Bunyan trophy. So for all those reasons, it's just a weird thing. And I'll tell you and I give credit to the guys at Rivalry Trophy who have made these replica jugs. And the first thing they made, and I have one here, is the Paul Bunyan mini. And this thing undoubtedly is really cool. I mean, it is like Michigan man cave, man shrine, like required at this point, right? And of course, you got to add the little helmet on top, which Ira gave me mine, little Riddell helmet that goes over Paul. And that kind of made it cool. But you brought up a great point, which was about the visibility of the thing after State was beating us, which I think it has also added to it.
Sure. I mean, DPJ, after, touchdowns in 2018 and 2019, mocking, the Paul Bunyan pose and shaking around looking like a bobblehead, kind of doing his thing. I mean, it was important to the players, even though the old guard, as you're bringing out, was kind of just against. Well, they were against Michigan State being in the Big Ten. They were against probably having a trophy to, present to the winner each and every single year. And then, it's like they kind of had, I think Lloyd Carr once called it the ugliest trophy in sports, right?
It's brutal and ugly in that, and also that Michigan never viewed this as a field trophy, right? This was a locker room trophy. And for obvious reasons, probably because it's, it's 9 feet.
9 feet.
Yeah. And, maybe Big John Falk said, this is a locker room trophy because he didn't want to lug that thing out. But that changed. And I think you can read between the lines, and maybe not, you don't even have to do that. But if you read John U. Bacon's books and some of the things that have happened after the State games, and again, I know this goes both ways, but we're on WTKA. I think Harbaugh was pissed off, and I'm sure the order was given, go ahead and running around the field with it, and Jim knows this. He knows the history. He knows that traditionally we viewed that as something that you keep tucked away.
Well, he's been part of the history.
Yeah, he sure has.
And he has suffered personally in games more recently as a coach as opposed to a player. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be personal to him. So these things happen, and now Michigan and Michigan State are playing for for the Jug, or not for the Jug, but for the Paul Bunyan Trophy Saturday. What are you thinking about in this game?
I look back at the Minnesota game, and look, fans are funny, right? Everyone's all excited. Wow, we crushed Minnesota. I think last I checked, I think they beat us 4 times in my lifetime, probably yours too, Steve, right? Mm-hmm. And we get excited. We're supposed to, look, Michigan's supposed to beat the middling teams pretty well. But the fact is, we just overwhelmed them, and that's what I saw out there. And again, I know they had some players missing, and it hurt them on special teams and this and that. We just overwhelmed them. So I'm encouraged going to this game. I heard the Zoltan clip at the end there. I think State's going to, traditionally there's been a little bit of a curse around the first time, a new coach plays, or we play a new coach. And I think State's going to give it a good shot. I just don't think they have the tools. And I just think there's too much firepower, and Michigan's going to get this run going away. And I plan to watch at home. As you know, Steve, we're usually upstairs, and I assume it's just a restricted media that's going to be there. So I'm curious how the game's covered and things like that. Is kind of another thing I'm interested in watching, other than, of course, the big game.
Well, I think for us, I mean, it's people are going to be staying in the same place, asking their questions, 20 feet, 30 feet apart from one another, probably. But that's a different story for a different day. But I'm excited about Michigan State because of the results of the games last Saturday. Again, Michigan just, for the most part, and believe me, it wouldn't be me without picking it apart a little bit from a realistic standpoint on both sides. That Michigan had a lot of things bounce their way. You certainly saw what COVID can actually do to a team. Minnesota's special teams, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why they did the fake punt, is because their last punt went for 19 yards, Greg.
Right, the fake punt, and then they got goofy right on the kickoffs too, which burned them a couple times.
Because they didn't have a guy who they thought could kick to the 20-yard line.
Yeah, it's remarkable. We forget that, and then we always tend to. I always tend to forget that we're talking about kids. I mean, these guys, these are young men. Absolutely, they're well trained, well drilled. More and more now with specialists and everything like that. They're still kids, and so going to the second or third kicker on Minnesota's roster is going to be a dicey proposition, and it hurt. It hurt them. It affected the game big time.
Yeah, Minnesota wasn't necessarily known for a team that has a ton of 4-star players. I think they only had 4 on the roster. They currently have some depth issues. I think PJ Fleck's going to take care of that. I think they've signed verbally, by the way, 7 4-star players for the 2021 class, so they're going to double that pretty quick. So, I mean, that's going to rise. But in the meantime, you get reminded of something that, Andy Menery would always talk about. You can't forget about special teams. And sometimes I'd like to. But, I mean, clearly that was an advantage that affected things throughout the way, because Minnesota had to resort to basically a pooch kickoff. I mean, you've heard of pooch punt, but I've not heard of a pooch kickoff. They would do that occasionally to maybe mix it up and have some confusion in the second or third tier about who should field it. I think everybody knows by now that, when in doubt, signal a fair catch and just catch the darn ball. But they were pooching it up there. Michigan was getting great field position. They thought they'd do a dribbler. I mean, I've seen some kickers try to do a line drive to get somebody, to hit somebody on the first level, because sometimes that head without discipline, those guys on the first level got their heads to the side, and they tend to break off in their sprint maybe a little bit too early. And that sometimes a kicker can see that on film and try to hit somebody. To me, it's sort of like, pitching a 9-iron and trying to hit the flagstick. But, kickers are pretty good at doing something like that. And, you had to go through the first level, and then a second level player in Michigan just lifted his leg up, and it went through right to Michael Barrett. Michael Barrett says, "All right, I'll go." And Minnesota had a chance to close down the ranks because they're all spread out over the field. I think that they had a chance to close down the ranks by the time Barrett was at midfield, just made the kicker miss, and he was off to the races.
Yeah, and I was watching that play with Barrett, and I'm like, well, why isn't he going? Like, he took off, and he seemed to run out of gas to me. Like, well, I was almost disappointed he didn't score. And then they said he puked before the play or something like that.
A couple of times.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, well, of course, everybody's like, "Do you have COVID?" You know, and it's like, no, I'm just basically nervous, you know. And sometimes there's video of him, not on network, but there was a video of him like on the field right before they're snapping the ball. I could tell that people are in their hand down positions, and it just comes up in the middle of the deal. And I'm just like, oh man, imagine being tackled there. But
no, it's nuts, man. It's nuts. But I was excited, and of course, the Jug Week is my big week for media appearances because it's kind of a pet project of mine to do the Jug history. Less so on the Bunyan, but for obvious reasons, for the same reasons I mentioned before. But bottom line, I was really happy with the results, and then, of course, as a fan, everyone was looking at Milton. I've been waiting for, Andrew Luck Jr. or the second to show up in Ann Arbor at some point. I think we all have with Coach Harbaugh here. And I think everyone saw pretty much what they wanted to see. Can we nitpick? I'm sure you could, Steve, but
and I might later on Saturday with Sam and I. Here's the funny thing. You know what Sam's going to be like on Saturday, and we all look forward to it, and we're excited about it. And then there's this euphoric hyperbole that comes out that makes me defend Michigan State. And I hate it. I don't want to defend Michigan State, but sometimes I feel like I got to for just a sense of realism. But that's my character flaw, not Sam's.
Yeah, I think we have to unplug from the fan because if you just profile Michigan fans, we were concerned about the season, nervous, and then we shoot up to sky high like no one can stop us. Like,
isn't that?
Yeah.
Tell me about your chart.
Yeah.
That you occasionally post out there on mvictors.com and through your friends at Twitter and Facebook. You have a chart sensing the mood of Michigan fans, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So it did jump this week.
It's called the Mood Index, right? And I publish it during the football season after each game, and it's kind of a reflection of how we're feeling about the team, right? And there's a scale, right? Are we feeling national championship down to torches, Ann Arbor torch and pitchfork is, there's a line out there, the program's in a mess, and it kind of goes on that scale. And I started years ago because, it was actually during the week, some team beat some team, we won, everything looked great. And I'm like, wow, these events, they've effectively elevated everyone's mood. Like everyone feels better about the team because these things happen, right? And then
I'm smiling the whole hour. I mean, there's a reason why I've been smiling the whole hour. So yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, exactly. So what I tried to do with some help of some of my my nerd friends on Twitter and that kind of thing was to get some input. And Scott Robbins, the awesome author of the Block Hams, made these great faces. Actually, a few of them look like Harbaugh, but this was done before Jim was here. And kind of with an expression, and it's kind of a fun thing to do. But I reassessed the mood of the fan base, and what you've seen it's actually been a very similar pattern. Is we have this spike during the year, we have a setback in the early middle part of the year, and then we creep up toward the end of the season, and it goes and it drops down like a rock after the obvious happens.
We're not gonna talk about that team. Not today.
It's been
fun.
Not
going to talk about that team.
It's amazingly you could trade it, Steve. You had you mentioned Zoltan was on, and he was Snowflake, and they had their IPO. You could trade this. You could trade it.
Trade it or fade it. Inside reference. Inside reference
to at Fast Money on CNBC, which Steve and I are joking about because when we're not talking about Michigan football, and we do talk off air, we're talking about CNBC, the hosts, the shows, and it's a ratings killer. So maybe I should stop.
I will mention, though, you did get a reply from one of the hosts yesterday. Which was
I did. So
outstanding.
Yeah, shout out to Guy Adami.
Outstanding, Greg. Good work as always. Thanks again for joining us here, reminiscing about the Little Brown Jug, and of course the Paul Bunyan Trophy that Michigan would like to see kept in their trophy case and perhaps locked up for a number of years to come.
All right, my spies tell me that the jug will be updated next week with the score, the 49-24 score, I believe it was.
And you will be there.
I hope so. We'll see, COVID, but I hope so. But I love it, Steve. Great to see you. Go Blue. And I love the show. Fantastic Friday. This is so fun every year.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Greg Dooley, Michigan historian, creator of mvictors.com, and also the writer, voice, or producer of This Week in Michigan Football History. Heard on the Countdown to Kickoff during the third hour of our program. So let me tell you what's coming up.